Originally, this was going to be titled Demon Souls, the Forgotten Souls game. Well, then the PS5 reveal happened and shit all over that idea. So now let's instead explore why Demon Souls was almost forgotten, and yet still both deserves its remake and stands beside its younger brothers Dark Souls and Bloodborne as the greatest of this subgenre. But before I do that, I'm going to take just a minute to explain why people like these games. If you're a Souls fan, feel free to skip to this part of the video. So, if you've somehow never played one of these games over the past 11 years, or more likely, played one for an hour and gave up, I'm going to briefly explain what makes this subgenre so fantastic and refreshing to millions of fans. First off, and most obvious, is the challenge. But this has given the Souls games a bad rep because they've been associated with tryhards and our signature motto, get good. While funny definitely doesn't help. But the hard truth is, these games are really not that difficult for the most part. You guys who've given up early on just never learned how to play them. So while you really do need to get good, being bad at Dark Souls or Bloodborne in the beginning is expected. All of us were bad when we started out. But we persevered because of reason 2, the combat mechanics. The beauty of Souls combat is that it's incredibly simple. Every weapon type only has a handful of moves split between light and heavy attacks, and whether you're wielding it one-handed or two-handed. Defensive options are a shield and rolling out of the way. That's literally it. Every other aspect of combat is based on the incredibly diverse range of enemies and bosses that you encounter, and their own unique movesets and behavior. So 90% of a Souls game's difficulty comes down to how well you adapt to fighting new enemies, and dealing with Miyazaki's dickish level design and ambush encounters. If you stick around long enough to learn the basics, you'll be rewarded with what I believe, unironically, to be one of the most satisfying experiences in gaming.
It's as satisfying to me as coming is, as having sex with a woman and coming.
Another great thing about this series is its dark worlds and their lore and characters. One look at VatiVidya's channel will show you the depth of world building in these games. And the genius thing about it is that the story is told almost entirely through item descriptions, the environment, and cryptic dialogue. If you don't give a shit about the story, you can completely ignore it and still have a great time because the only cutscenes are boss intros. Of course, there are plenty of other reasons to love these games. The environments are beautiful, there's co-op, shitty PvP that people like for some reason. These games are incredibly well made, so just give them a chance, that's all I'm saying. I covered this briefly in my top 10 games you refuse to play video, but the most significant mechanic that separates Demon Souls from Software's other games is world tendency. World tendency represents the state of the world, or Archstone, and how demonic or pure it becomes. It's affected mainly in two ways: by dying in human form, which darkens it, and defeating a boss, which lightens it. The darker the world, the stronger the enemies and the more souls they drop, and as you can imagine, the opposite applies for light worlds. But the truly unique part of the mechanic is that when you achieve a pure white world, new areas of the level are unlocked with secret weapons and equipment. And in a pure black world, special black phantom versions of NPCs spawn that drop their weapons, and primeval demons appear that drop special souls and brighten the world upon death. The caveat is that achieving pure white requires playing the game almost perfectly, or entirely in soul form. You can only afford to die once in human form in 4 out of the 5 worlds to still have a chance at pure white. And the problem with soul form is that you're permanently crippled to half of your max health unless you wear the cling ring, which ups it to 75%. But the rewards for pure white absolutely make it worth it if you like creative weapons and builds. My favorite is the Dragon Bone Smasher, a massive slab of iron shaped into a sword that annihilates any normal enemy in one hit. It's the precursor to the Dragon Tooth from Dark Souls. World tendency is surprisingly balanced in that if you waste too many stones of ephemeral eyes, the rare item that makes you human again, the resulting soul increase from darker worlds will let you level up more often, which, like Bloodborne, every time you increase your soul level, your physical defense increases as well. So just like I said in the top 10, Demon's Souls is not the hardest Souls game. I would argue it's actually the second easiest after Dark Souls 2, because you can literally level grind instead of getting good. So let's lay that argument to rest for the maybe 5 fans that see this video. My favorite aspect of the Souls games, and most games in general, is the boss fights. Starting with Dark Souls 2, bosses in these games have devolved into an assessment of how good you are at pressing the circle button, which is highly disappointing because they used to be a lot more creative mechanically. Case in point, Demon's Souls. Almost every boss in this game has a unique gimmick or weakness to exploit, even the first boss, the Phalanx. I won't cover them all, but here's just a few of the interesting ones. Phalanx covers itself in shield slimes that can block attacks and throw spears. Armor Spider shoots webs that slow you down and floods the tunnel with fire when you stay close to him for too long. Leechmonger can cover you with leeches that slowly suck you dry, can regenerate health, and is severely weak to fire. The Fool's Idol can create fake clones of herself and lays invisible paralyzing traps throughout the arena. Now, isn't that more interesting than fighting 1,000 giant knights and spamming dodge roll? I think so, anyway. But even the original giant knight in From's games, the Tower Knight, is more interesting than most of the rest, even if for spectacle alone. The dozen archers sniping you and the huge area of effect of his attacks are intimidating. But once you take out the minions, he's actually a pushover. Definitely still an iconic boss, though. If you're more into turbo roll spam Dark Souls 3 bosses, the Penetrator, Flame Lurker, and Old King Allant will be right up your alley. Flame Lurker especially will give you that challenge you're looking for, trust me.
Drawn from its vessel. Let strength be granted.
Instead of having a cohesive, semi-linear world with shortcuts connecting everything together, Demon's Souls 5 worlds are completely separate, and 4 of the 5 can be completed in any order. Now, normally I would praise this unique approach, and I do think it's a good idea in concept, but in reality it's not that well balanced. While you could definitely complete the Shrine of Storms or Valley of Defilement directly after the first boss, you would be making the game significantly harder on yourself. The enemy health and damage there is way higher than the first 3 worlds. Each world supplies you with different resources and upgrade materials, so if anything, you should strive to get as far as you can in Stonefang Tunnel first, as that's where you get the upgrade stones for the standard upgrade path. After completing the first boss in each world, the second section has a massive difficulty spike to encourage you to complete other levels first. The third boss is then directly after the second. So basically your playthrough will look something like this. You'll go from 1-1 to 2-1 to 1-2 to 3-1 to 5-1 to 4-1 with a dip into 2-2 for upgrade materials, and then finally you're free to choose the rest. Of course, you don't have to do this, but you're purposely making the game harder if you don't. Shrine of Storms especially will destroy you if you're not prepared, and if you refuse to use a shield, it'll probably still shit on you. So I would argue for the first half of the game, the non-linearity is purely a gimmick to punish new players. Once your weapon of choice is upgraded to +7 or more, you can take on pretty much anything the game throws at you, which is where the freedom of choice shines, but before that, you're just going to play the game naturally in some slight variation of that order. Ironically, this is one of the few areas Dark Souls 2 actually improved on a previous game, fulfilling the open level selection design premise pretty well, actually.
Destroyer, I have failed you.
You killed him, didn't you? Very well. I can no longer resist you. Do as you like. Take your precious demon soul.
For Souls fans who love the world building, lore, and tragic characters, you're probably going to be a little disappointed here. Vati Vidya only has 4 videos on Demon Souls, and I would argue that the Stockpile Thomas one was stretching it. The only areas fleshed out are the Boletarian Palace and Valley of Defilement. Which is really a shame because visually the Tower of Latria has some of the heaviest sense of atmosphere and mystery in all of From Software's games. There's like 4 or 5 different prisons spread across the games, yet none come close to portraying that sense of misery and hopelessness like Latria. There's countless hollows in prison begging for salvation, escape, or maybe release from their torment. The incredibly dangerous tentacle-faced wardens require an almost stealthy approach to kill to avoid being paralyzed and impaled. The Fool's Idol represents both a symbol of worship for the homeless, malnourished prisoners and an insurmountable obstacle preventing escape. As long as her secret worshipper is alive, she cannot be killed. The second section of the level is even more interesting. It's made up of a series of dilapidated towers and interconnecting pathways, with a giant suspended heart in the center. Below the towers is a swamp of blood infested with man-faced centipedes. I can't be the only one who wants to know more about this place. Maybe Bluepoint will consult Miyazaki for more lore details in the remake. As for NPCs, they're severely lacking. Most of them are just spell teachers or shopkeeps. The few quest lines are incredibly bare bones, with the exception of Ostrava's. Basically, they just involve showing the character a legendary weapon that can only be found in a pure white world. The best NPC is series veteran Patches the Hyena, still the eternal backstabber.
Don't hold it against me, eh? Take your time, starving to death. Then I'll sell every last trinket off your corpse.
Despite always trying to kill you and loot your corpse, he's got a certain charm. I can't bring myself to kill him. Demon Souls is the most grounded in medieval pseudo-realism in the series, 90% of the weapons and armor are real or believable enough for the time period. Short swords, knives, shields, halberds, bows, crossbows, nothing too fancy really. I literally used a spear for like half of the game. The other 10% are created from demon souls, or are one of the unique revelations from God its wielders consumed by the Valley of Defilement. Compare this to Dark Souls 3, where you can dual-wield ultra great swords covered in fire, and you can see how these games have become an anime parody of themselves. Both Demon and Dark Souls capture the feeling of hopelessness against insurmountable odds, and only with massive amounts of souls do you become superhuman. And even then, not anime over-the-top bullshit levels. Plague of Gripes, if you ever see this, I agree with you 100% on this stuff. Well, I think it's pretty obvious what the remake could add to the game. Omnidirectional rolling, new servers for summons and invasions, and possibly removing the item weight limit mechanic would be my safe guesses. But if Bluepoint really wants to make a legendary remake that surpasses the original, Resident Evil 1 style, there's a few things they could contribute. First, flesh out the world building, starting with item descriptions and hopefully extending to environmental storytelling. Second, add some new NPCs and quest lines, or extend the ones from the original game. Third, and this one would be the most impressive and least likely, would be to add the sixth world that was never finished. I don't know if it was cut for time, but originally it was supposed to be a land of giants. More content is always good, and it would elevate this remake to absolutely must play in my book. Judging by the Shadow of the Colossus remake, I don't think Bluepoint is really into improving on games, merely remaking them with modern graphics. So I wouldn't get my hopes up, but you never know. Well, in the meantime, if you got a PS3 lying around, you've got no excuse not to try Demon Souls if you're a Souls fan. If you've somehow never tried one of these games, or thought Dark Souls 3 or Bloodborne were too fast-paced, Demon Souls is the perfect entry point for this genre. It's less skill-based and more about awareness, preparation, and learning boss weaknesses. And for me, that's always been more appealing than mashing the circle button. If you have a powerful PC, I've seen a PS3 emulator that runs the game fairly well, so that might be worth a shot. If neither of these is an option for you, you could always wait for the remake. I'm willing to bet that's what a lot of you were planning when you clicked on this video anyway. Let's hope the next gen of consoles doesn't suck ass like this one. Well, at least I'm finally back to normal reviews. For better or worse, I guess. You know, even if you guys want to see me, like, rant, lose my shit, or whatever, you know, complain about the game industry, sometimes I just gotta make some videos for myself, you know? And this is what I like to do. Well, I do like ranting as well, but not all the time. Gotta be positive sometimes. Well, if there's any games you'd like to hear me talk about, or any specific subjects, news, whatever, you know, feel free to tell me in the comments below. You know, give it a like if you liked it. Subscribe, I guess, if you want to see more. Probably do that SpongeBob Alpha Bikini Bottom game for my next video. I don't know, man. I love 3D platformers, so if you have no interest in Alpha Bikini Bottom, I guess you don't have to watch that video, but I'm definitely going to do it anyway. See you next time, guys.